is Ogawanyu, Research Director for SAPinsider, and I'm thrilled to be here with Jason Nyhus, Senior Vice President of Global Sales and Alliances at Digital River. Jason, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Great, thanks for joining. So I'm going to start with a pretty, what I hope is an easy question. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your role at Digital River?
Absolutely. So I'm, as you said, I'm responsible for our sales and our partnerships here at Digital River. Been at the company for 21 years, and it has coincided very nicely with really the rise of e-commerce and the industry. And so been really fortunate to be a part of a lot of really interesting customers, from Major League Baseball to Electronic Arts to Microsoft, and a whole bunch of others along the way. Really understanding the shift of kind of the role of e-commerce then versus the role of e-commerce now. So really excited to be talking to you.
That's awesome. So in terms of the current, you mentioned e-commerce. In terms of the current business environment, it seems like it continues to provide a tailwind for e-commerce for our community. Can you talk about what you're seeing across the e-commerce landscape that is maybe adding to that?
Yeah, I mean, e-commerce is a great place to be during a global pandemic. It has really kind of created a bit of a tailwind to our business, which is fantastic. But some of the things that are driving change and are kind of here to stay are things like the reality that some of these brands out there are brands without borders, and people spend a lot of time thinking about how they serve customers more locally and how they serve customers wherever they are in the world. I think that's a trend that we continue to see happening. So, and with that kind of requirement for brands to be more local, it also means that the company has to deal with the contracting of these products, the integration of these products, the dealing with challenges or non-happy path related items, and the reconciliation of these items. So the more global you want to be, the more local you want to be, that results in effectively a multifactorial challenge around reconciliation and vendor management. And that becomes the big problem. So tying this back to what Digital River does, we effectively offer this business model called Merchant of Record, which is very similar to the choice that brands can make around build your own and live in the reality I describe of dozens of integrations, dozens of partners, dozens of things to reconcile, or work with a company like ours who does all of that for you. One contract, one integration, everything comes pre-reconciled. So that's what we do. We're really a back office as a service company that predominantly enterprise and mid-market brands use to solve the problems we're talking about here. But the reality of it is really progressive, smart brands understand the difference between cross-border transaction versus an onshore transaction. And I'll spend a minute describing the difference. Cross-border basically means I'll use US to, let's say, Australia. Okay. Cross-border would mean that I'm a US brand with a US entity with my inventory in the United States selling to a customer in Australia. Well, the further you are from your customer across all those dimensions, the lower the odds of success. And success means how quickly does the product get there? Is the payment going to go through? Is it going to be compliant with local laws and regulations, et cetera? And so if you fulfill that order to that customer in Australia, the customer will feel likely that it is a cross-border transaction. If, however, you do it in an onshore way, then you're using an Australian entity with Australian and local acquiring and potentially even your inventory in region. And that will feel like a local transaction with an Australian customer. The difference between the two are dramatic in terms of what the customer feels, but also what the brand feels in terms of benefit. So an onshore transaction has between an 8 and a 12% better authorization rate, which is a corollary to revenue, versus something that's being cross-border. Okay. But not to mention all of the kind of defects, like the fact that it's going to take a long time to get there, the fact that they might have $1.42 on their credit card for a foreign transaction fee, and the fact that, there's going to be high decline rates or basically frauded out transactions that aren't really fraud.
What was that like, over the last 2 quarters, kind of talking to clients and customers and understanding their challenges with recent demand shocks?
Yeah, good stuff. So, before I answer the question, I want to give a little bit more of a context on how the Digital River model works. Okay, so Digital River acts as the merchant and seller of record, which puts us on the hook for both being financially and legally liable for the transaction. And for that, we bring all of our global payment infrastructure. We are the tax filer on the transaction. We screen for fraud, and we handle compliance in virtually every country around the world. And so when you plug into Digital River, you effectively get all of our payment types and everything you need to be able to sell locally where you can and cross-border where you need to serve everywhere in the country. And so I used this parallel earlier, but it's a lot like brand's choice around, do I set up my own data center and manage and do all the work, or do I plug into AWS and get immediate scale and benefit, and I only pay for what I use? And that decision 8 to 10 years ago was a really hard one that brands wrestled with. Now it's no decision. Right. Really smart progressive companies are doing AWS or Azure or something along those lines because it's a better business model and it helps you be more agile. So now, to answer your question, which I think is a good one, when brands use Digital River, they're effectively local and global on day one. And so now they're not putting their energy and infrastructure into managing vendor relationships, many different contracts, many different integrations. They're putting their energy into localized marketing, better social media outreach campaigns, better localization. Digital River is the plumbing behind some of the biggest brands on the internet, selling in every country around the world. And part of the reason they use us is so that they can focus on driving demand, being great at marketing, positioning, and selling, and allow us to be world-class at transaction management. So we saw tremendous spikes with some of our clients all over the world in basically all the last 18 months. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to worry about all of the things and the lights being on because they use us. So we handle the spikes. It's zero challenge. We have uptime that's world-class, 4, 5, 9, something like that. So they just drive the demand, and Digital River's there to make sure they happen.
And so during, recent economic disruptions, your customers, Digital River customers, were able to pivot quickly because of their relationship with Digital River, because of your solution, your portfolio solutions that you provide them, and the infrastructure as a service, almost payments, fraud, tax infrastructure as a service that you're providing with the technology. That's
right. So examples include, we had a prospect that we worked on with SAP. We sent them our fleet of APIs. They said, we're ready to go. And we hadn't even started talking about the contract. So business agility is really what we're really good at, because again, it's like AWS, turn it on and you're ready to rock. So we add countries or new capabilities or new products in minutes or hours that take other companies months and quarters to plan, integrate, and launch and run. So there's an enormous benefit of speed and scale that you get from working with a company like us.
Can we drill down a little bit on that and talk about, you previously referenced like buy versus build. Are there, kind of ballpark numbers that you discuss when you're having these conversations? For example, ABC retail company, if they were to build, they're looking at a 9-month project and this cost versus connecting and integrating with Digital River solutions, and this is the cost, and here's where they can apply more of their strategic resources.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the challenge becomes, how good of an allocator are they of real costs of doing business? A lot of people think that the internal costs of managing multiple vendors and contracts and all that stuff doesn't include in their cost. So if you take an honest view, and we had a company called IDC do this research a number of years ago, they found that Digital River customers saved between 30 and 40% of the cost to stand up and operate versus doing it all yourself. And so included in that is a whole bunch of vendor fees to payments, tax, fraud providers. It's internal teams to stand up and manage. And doesn't include the liabilities that your business is signing up for, which are effectively uncapped. So generally speaking, we're 30 to 40% cheaper than brands trying to do this themselves. And the economic benefits of us being more local is usually between 8 and 12%, depending on the country, the payment type, the maturity of the business, et cetera. So that's it in a nutshell. We save you a bunch of time and money on the front end, and we generate 8 to 12% more business for you, which effectively more than pays for the cost of our service.
That's great. I know that's a big topic of concern for some of our customers moving forward. And so it'll be great to have that understanding for them. In terms of kind of your Digital Rivers app integration with SAP, can you talk about kind of Digital Rivers' relationship with SAP and the customers that you're working with on the SAP side, and how Digital Rivers app provides simplification for them with regards to some of their business processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an app in the SAP App Store that is basically this Digital River business model. So by downloading and using that app, you effectively get 26 local acquirers, you get industry-leading fraud capabilities, and augmented with third-party provider that Digital River has contracts with. You get world-class tax and things like landed cost and cross-border capabilities, and you also get the compliance in a box, which comes as part of this managed package. So in a nutshell, Digital River has going global in a box in the SAP App Store. We're really excited and proud to be working with SAP. It's a relatively new relationship for us. But number one, Digital River is a client of SAP. And part of the way that we're able to deliver this back office in a box is because we leverage SAP's infrastructure to do it. So SAP is part of who Digital River is. Number two, SAP is a client of Digital River. One of your reporting products actually sells subscriptions to small businesses, and Digital River handles the automation of the e-commerce back office for that product. And then number three, we're partners. And we have some very large shared clients, companies like ServiceNow or Lenovo or Razer, that are industry leaders in really going direct to consumer and delivering great experiences. So in a nutshell, we're very much tied and connected at the hip to SAP and the great work that you guys are doing.
What are some of the maybe future-looking automation, either strategies or implementations that you're excited about, that Digital River is excited about, that maybe one or two customers, if you can talk about it, have adopted and you're seeing really interesting ROI or benefits from that our customers may not know about and would be excited to hear about?
Yeah, so one of the things that, if you go all the way back to Digital River's origin, we started off by serving the software industry, and they pivoted into subscriptions very early, 2002 maybe, and Digital River was right there to help them with that. And so software is inherently global on day one. It's effectively a brand or it's a borderless product. It can be sold in virtually every country around the world. And nowadays it's just access to services. But what that enabled Digital River to go really do is to recognize the benefit of local acquiring. And so we built this network of 26 acquirers. And I'll get to your AI question in a second. But this list of 26 acquirers was really set out to say, hey, I want to be able to sell these products locally using local payments and local acquiring, local banking, to make sure that these transactions go through. And because we aggregate all of the volume across all of our clients, we're in aggregate a top 100 merchant in the e-commerce world. And what would you do if you're a top 100 e-commerce merchant in the world? You would use those to buy more better local payment relationships, industry-leading fraud, industry-leading tax providers or services. And because you got 26 acquirers, we now have the ability to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to say on every transaction, which of these 26 acquirers is most likely to say yes, based on the products we're selling, based on the average order value, based on other heuristics, where the customer is, et cetera. And we send that transaction to who we think is most likely to say yes. It's a little bit like a kid asking for ice cream. If you, in their mind, they're like, is dad going to say yes or is mom? And they go to mom first. If she says no, that kid or / RAI automatically goes to who we think is second most likely to say yes. And then if that fails, we go to number 3. That intelligent transaction routing process, which continually gets updated around and it gets smarter with every transaction, is what we now apply automatically to every single customer we use. And the reason I talked about subscriptions at the beginning is in a world where you're global and selling subscriptions, that 1 or 2 or 3% lift that you see in year 1, if it's still around 80% of it in year 3, is enormous benefits. It's almost compounding the annual growth rate of the survivors that you didn't churn. And so that value that was created in subscriptions now gets applied to some of the largest consumer electronics, apparel, health and beauty brands that we're working with today. So they benefit from the local acquiring, and they're benefiting from that artificial intelligence machine learning process around making sure as many transactions go through as possible.
One question I had is in terms of your solutions stacks, your payments, tax, trade and risk, compliance, fraud, in terms of that mix, that solution mix, how have you seen that change or shift, I guess, pre-pandemic to post-pandemic?
Yeah, great question. So the big difference between Digital River's offering is we really sell one thing. We sell a merchant of record model, which comes complete with all of those services.
Okay.
And so, you can't buy them a la carte from us. It's part of how we deliver the value prop and all the differentiation and benefits that I described. So you sign up and you take advantage of it or you don't. So it's a relatively binary decision. But I'll tell you this, relative to the way the market has responded to the value prop has changed. So originally we thought of ourselves as a payment-centered business, and we to some extent still do, but the value prop around tax is off the charts. And all of the law changes recently, and you can Google these and find them all, but literally every week, a major country changes their tax law and they expect you to do things differently or your business practices. One example is India. India just implemented a change in laws that don't allow for auto renewal subscriptions under a certain value. And every company overnight had to immediately move from an auto renewal, which means I'm just going to take your money every month until you tell me to stop, to a manual renewal. Well, manual renewal, meaning you have to go and opt in to say, I still want my Adobe Creative Cloud. I still want my Autodesk CAD product. I still want my fill in the blank. And the management of the laws and regulations, brands certainly recognize that they don't want to be in the business of keeping up with all of these law changes. And that's a huge benefit that Digital River brings. We have to do it for all the companies, so you might as well let us do it for you. So right. Net of it is payments is who we thought we were and where the value was derived from. The reality of it is it's more coming in the context of tax and compliance law changes that are really benefiting us.
Right. So tax and compliance, you'd say, are now increasing in priority for your customers in terms of the conversations you're having around the value chain that Digital River offers.
That's exactly right, because those are the things that come with liabilities. Right. And anybody can say, can go negotiate a better payment contract and maybe save a penny per transaction. But when you're talking about taking financial risk for a large company, that's where the buck stops, and they don't want to take on that risk, and that's where our value prop is so strong.
That's interesting. We, here at SAPinsider, we just were about to release our tax report, and one of the questions we asked our community was about pain points, right? And the 2 biggest pain points were tax determination and calculation, and then indirect tax reporting. And then when we drilled down into those pain points, they specifically referenced that GST sales and use tax as core challenges that that tax professionals in our tax community they are witnessing and having to navigate, and therefore it's increasing that priority for these global companies that have to deal with this tax compliance. So it really, from our side, we're seeing similar elevation of the tax compliance conversation.
Yep, that's because the laws are changing every day, and these governments are trying to raise revenues, which is code for make sure that every transaction is taxed. I'll say this. Whenever we get a tax person into our meetings where we're talking about our value prop and delegates from the CFO's organization, our odds of success go way up. The business benefits of what we do, this back office as a service, is enormously embraced by people in the financial community. They completely see the value and all of the risk it lets the business out of and the processes that companies have to deal with. We effectively give our clients their cash free and clear of any other obligation. And finance people love that.
Right, and so finance professionals, they're allowed to pursue cash management optimization opportunities with your solutions, in a sense, or as part of a strategy to supplement that.
Yeah, we help them close their books in a day versus close their books in however long it takes you to reconcile the 25 different buy now, pay laters, the PayPals, the whatevers of the world, all the different local payment types. So we allow them to pre-reconcile everything in a day. Thank you very much for the time. Great conversation.
Thank you.